What Satelligence does is, so our mission is to stop deforestation. It's very simple. Remote sensing doesn't stop deforestation, but then we happen to work for a remote sensing company, and we happen to know a lot about forestry and land use, and what people do in the tropical regions, commodity production, supply chains. So we knew a lot about these things, and then we tied some knots together, and something started to emerge. You should believe in change, right? Otherwise, you shouldn't do it. If you want to stop deforestation, you can become cynical or nihilistic. Yeah, we'll never stop because the world is driven by money. But it doesn't work like that. So you should believe in you should believe in the inherent goodness of people. So people are inherently good. Like I never met anyone who is pure evil. Most evil is clumsiness and naivety and stupidness. All these so-called evil companies, there's only wonderful people working there who are really committed also to the same goals as you and me.
Arjen Vrielink is the director and co-founder at Satelligence, a company that's focused on stopping deforestation using satellite imagery. They work directly with commodity suppliers, so people selling cocoa and coffee, for example, to understand the reasons behind deforestation and how alternatives can be found. Some of these companies come across as being evil sometimes, behind a lot of the deforestation that we see. And we talk with Arjen about how real change can happen when partnering and working with these companies rather than against them. A quick mention of the sponsors before we get started. They help me get better gear and spend more time to be able to do some of these recording in person. This podcast is sponsored by the Radiant Earth Foundation. They support machine learning practitioners in the Earth observation industry by providing open access geospatial data and tools, and support programs like the STAC Spatial Temporal Asset Catalog that help find data. They're currently accepting nominations for the 2022 Radiant ML Hub Impact Award. So if you're doing anything related to agriculture in Africa, you can head to the link in the show notes to apply for a chance of winning a $5,000 cash prize. This podcast is also sponsored by Element 84. They're a geospatial software engineering company that's focused on big data problems. And so one of the things that they've worked on is getting the Sentinel-2 imagery on AWS Open Programs, so it's a lot easier to access. I've actually had Dan Pallone, their CEO and co-founder, on the podcast to talk about the journey of how he started the company and where their vision is. You can also find that in the link in the show notes. With all of that said, I'm Maxim Linneman, and this is my conversation with Arjen Vrielink. I don't know if you know, but I like starting these conversations in the same way every time. I like asking people how they would describe themselves. So I've been thinking like how you would answer that. I'm quite curious to know, how would you describe yourself?
That's a very good opening question, and also very embarrassing for your guests, because
I know.
Yeah, I actually I ask these questions in job interviews. So okay. I asked them, if you leave your current job, how would your teammates describe you, or what would your teammates miss?
Okay.
But so it's a bit of a similar question to this. And then how I would describe myself, I have no idea. I hardly think of myself in the third person.
And like if you were to give it a shot?
Then I would say, broadly interested in about everything, enthusiastic about almost anything, very resilient, so I'm very good at handling disappointments.
How so?
You mean you want an example, or?
Yeah.
So I don't have any concrete examples, but the way I have a deep conviction or idea about the contingency of life, right? So you can become a policeman or a fireman, and there's no, like, you can create the conditions to become it, but you can't, there's no recipe to become it.
Right.
So anything that happens could have happened differently.
So how do you approach that? How do you navigate How do you navigate life like that? We're going all in from the get-go.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I mean, the only interesting question about life is death. Huh? So any conversation should be about life, meaning everybody should talk about death all the time. That's the biggest thing. What was your question again?
No, I mean, like, I'm just trying to get to understand how your brain works a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't know. I have no idea. It's just that that's also, yeah, I don't know. It's also, I don't think that I'm the best person. Like, I don't even understand how other people's brain work, let alone.
That's why I wanted to talk with you as well, because I've had that feeling that you were often saying that like, you're not the person to think about that, but you do think a lot.
Yes.
And so that's why now I want to take the time to like pick your brain a little bit more and dive into. We'll get about the remote sensing and Earth observation, but I do like asking that question about like how people would describe themselves, and because I think it's quite revealing about like how people think, like where they decide to go, and that's why I'm poking around a little bit. So yeah. if we go to like the question that you ask, like how would the people you work with, how would they describe you?
How would they describe me? I would think, well, again, enthusiastic, committed, experienced, and again, broadly interested in a lot of topics, but also at the same time, I don't take anything seriously, starting with myself, and maybe this is also key to do. So I don't take myself serious. I don't see myself as a great thinker or particularly intelligent. So, and then I think most people they judge the world with themselves as a reference, and I think I also do that. And then, like, if I take myself as a reference, it's very difficult to take the world very serious. You know what I mean? So I think that maybe then I can get back to you with a quote from yourself.
Yeah.
So you were an intern in our company about 2 years ago, before COVID, and then at the end of the internship, you did a presentation of what you learned, and then the biggest compliment to me was when you said that you were very surprised or happy to see that you could work as a person and an organization on a serious topic and still have fun. And this to me was, on the one hand, it was a compliment to us, because that's what we want. Like, my number one mission in life is that other people enjoy their life. And since most of the time you spend in your job, you better have a nice job. So if you don't have a nice job, just find another job. So that was really meaningful to me. So thank you again for that. But then in addition, like, I think I asked you that because to me it's like, doesn't everyone do that? Like, I assume that everybody enjoys what they do in their daily life. And then you came with the example of the aerospace industry, with all these super serious engineers that especially take themselves very serious.
Yeah.
So I'm very flexible and open to any kind of persons, but persons who take themselves very serious, I'm very, very skeptical about them and highly allergic. So I'm like, that's like a natural enemy to me. Like, I can't imagine working in an environment with people who because to me, if you take yourself too serious, I see it as a lack of self-confidence.
Right.
But that's like my probably it's a wrong conclusion, but that's just, so we're getting in how my brain works as we speak.
Yeah.
So I would think that. So you should enjoy your life and don't take everything too seriously. But this is like, because life is contingent. Like you can pretend to control everything, but you don't. So take it easy and enjoy the fall.
It's fun that you mentioned that, because like I've thought about that presentation like a bunch after as well, like about that aspect, that I do think it really did, like it was an example of like a working example that you can do really impactful stuff, and we'll get to that in a bit, while still having fun. And I mean, like just even before we press record, like just seeing some of the team again and just laughing about stuff.
Yeah.
Have you always worked in places like that?
Yes. So and then again, I thought this was an attribute of the companies I worked in. But in every company I worked in, I had meaningful human relationships. So to me, this is the meaning of life, right? To have meaningful relationships with other humans. And I still see, so I worked for 5 or 6 companies. I think this is the 6th. And every single company I worked for, I still see those people. But I must say, maybe not in the way that people expect. Like my best friends, I see them once a year, right? So that's my social frequency. So those people, maybe like there's one guy I go to Brussels with every year to FOSDEM, the open source conference, where they also sell this stuff. So that's an example. And with him, I share 1 day of overlap. Working overlap. So I quit the company, and then he was my successor.
Okay.
So he came after me, and then there was 1 day overlap where I worked with him to onboard him to all the stuff that we did. And then we liked each other so much, we immediately made a dinner date. So we went out to eat dinner and drink beer, and it was first love. Love on first sight, I must say. So, and I still see him. And just as an example, and this, I think it was 10 or 15 years ago. And the way I work with him is exactly the same way I work with you. Like you, Max, but also Max as an intern. So I don't make any distinction between if I'm working with the intern or the data scientist or a doctor, research, whatever, or CEO. To me, it's all the same people. If you say something meaningful, you get my respect. Because before that, so yeah.
So let's go there. Like you mentioned, we'll get into Satelligence and all that, but I feel like now is a good time to bring it up. So how do you, because you've kind of started the company as well with Niels at Satelligence, right?
Not specifically. If you take the broader term, if we would make a movie about it, probably there would be a part. The writer would write me into it, but technically it didn't happen like that.
Okay.
So maybe to give a
let's go there then. Like how did Satelligence start?
So Satelligence is Niels and I. Niels Vrielink is the other director, whom I'm known since our student days in Wageningen University from the dark 90s. So we met each other in 1997 or something, and we were both in the student swimming club. We enjoyed swimming. We liked the same music. Then we did the same. We did a different thesis, but with the same supervisor in Indonesia in 2000. And then that supervisor started a company called Sarvision, and we started working there together. Then I left Sarvision in 2007, and Niels stayed working there. And then Niels, like fast forward 2016, Niels founded Satelligence. And then after 1 or 2 months after he founded, he asked me to come back. So Niels is one of those persons that I keep seeing outside of work. He asked me to come back, so I said no, because why would I do that? I really enjoyed my previous job.
Okay.
And after you've had a few jobs, you also really become appreciative of the, let's say, the glass becomes more half full. like if you're younger, you get more easily annoyed by like the negative stuff.
Okay.
And then when you get older, you learn to count your blessings and say, okay, there's shit everywhere and I can handle this shit. And the pros, the blessings are really good. So,
Yeah.
so I said no. And then, but then it was my wife who actually said, yeah, you should always, like, I've always been just a team member. In every role, in every company. And my wife said, no, you should be like a team leader or a leader at least once, just try it. So I thought, okay, this is the opportunity. And then I said, okay, let's do it together. So I joined Satelligence in 2017 and I brought some people from the other company as well. Like this was the condition for me to join because I had all these crazy ideas that I picked up and learned in the 9 years that I didn't work for Survision, because in Survision there was basically we're doing the same thing with Satelligence as we did back then, but at that time you had to pay for satellite data. The satellite data would come in on a CDR by mail, so there would be the bubble envelope every 30 days or 35 days when there was a new ERS satellite image available, and I would put it in my computer, process it. But conceptually, the forest change detection that we do is still the same, so we could already do it. But now, the market in 2016, the market became more willing to pay. Satellite data is for free. There's this thing called the cloud, so I don't have to invest $5 million for hard computing hardware. I can just pay for what I need. So all these things came together, and then Niels is really good. Like he has a really good intuition for the market, right? And then on my side, I never even thought about starting a company because my commercial side is like zero, or at least I thought. And also I didn't have any interest in that. And Niels is very good in the commercial side, so I thought, okay. So there's the commercial conditions is there, the technical and the market conditions are there. Let's see what we can bring. I have all these crazy ideas that I wish I knew when I worked at Survision. Like I learned this stuff in the other companies.
Right.
The only thing is there's these guys that I work with now that I know are capable of implementing these ideas, but they work on the other side. But then we had enough funding to let them join as well, so they joined, and then I thought, okay, let's do it, and that's basically how Satelligence got started.
Can you explain me, like at a high level, what Satelligence does?
Yeah. Oh no, it's almost gone. We had this beautiful business card here that had like our mission in the background. But what Satelligence does is, so our mission is to stop deforestation. It's very simple. So we want a zero deforestation future. This is because, like, I studied tropical land use in Wageningen. So natural resource management, so nature conservation in the tropics, that's my field. And then on the side, I learned about this thing called GIS and remote sensing in university. I thought, whoa, this is really cool. So I also graduated in that field. And Niels actually graduated in the forestry department in Wageningen on forest policy. So we know a lot about forestry in the tropics. We've been there and we saw all the destruction that's going on. And we're really committed to ending the deforestation there. And we think that remote sensing can be a great tool to achieve that goal, that mission.
How so? Like, why remote sensing? Like that was the thing I wanted to also explore, is like stopping deforestation is the thing you want to do. Like that's the mission. Why is Earth observation the tool that solves that problem?
It's the tool because we happen to work at a remote sensing company. So I must be honest, we started with it, we just discussed it, the classic solution looking for a problem, right? And then actually, so this remote sensing doesn't stop deforestation, but then we happen to work for a remote sensing company, and we happen to know a lot about forestry and land use and what people do in the tropical regions, commodity production, supply chains. So we knew a lot about these things, and then we tied some knots together, and something started to emerge. Together with the notion that if you look at the problem of deforestation, there's like the classical approach would be the governmental sector. So governments enforcing their laws to stop deforestation, but maybe the law are not strong enough, maybe the law enforcement is not strong enough, maybe there's some corruption. Apart from that, the political and governmental pace of frequency is glacial, like it's every 5 or 10 years when there's turnaround in new laws. Maybe there's the UN, World Bank, that kind of institutions, same problem. So lots of funding, very little executive power. And then on the other side, classically, there's the campaigning NGOs, the activists, who I see as putting, like they are one-issue parties. Basically, they're one-issue political parties, very executive and activistic, Greenpeace, Mighty Earth, WWF. So they put this on the agenda, but they are very polarizing and accusing.
Okay.
But that's their role. I mean, that's they create the political agenda. But the real driver, the real reason for the big deforestation, for example, in the 80s and 90s in Indonesia, is the commercial sector. So those are Northern Hemisphere consumer markets with associated manufacturing, retail, and trading companies that source from Southeast Asia. So if you want to tackle deforestation, maybe that's a good place to look. That's why we thought, okay, if we found Satelligence and give it a really commercial mission, because our premise is that you can't have a sustainable, or a company fighting for a sustainable goal without it being economically viable.
Yeah. If
you don't have an economic viable business model, there's no reason to be. So you don't even have a platform for your message. So that's a condition. And the other one, instead of fighting the enemy, why not join the enemy, so to say, and cooperate and engage with them and see how you can help them make a change. Because this is a personal conviction of me, is that companies don't exist. There's only people. So companies are abstractions.
Okay.
And there's Max across me. So I work with Cargill. Cargill is the most evil company in the world, but there's John and Hank from Cargill, who are the most wonderful persons you will ever meet. And they have zero evilness in them. Mm. So this is one of the things I think about a lot. Like, where's the tipping point? Where become 5 humans an organization, right?
Where does that happen? Like, how do you explain that shift then that happens, where there is this like very surreal thing that happens when you do meet people from these companies that you think are the most evil companies ever, and they're like wonderful people. Have you found a solution to that?
Yes, well, there's no solution, but I'm starting to be aware of why this happens. And this is, like I just described, the political governmental frequencies, like 4 or 5 year intervals. That's the pace of change. Yeah. Then if you look at companies, they have traditionally a 1 year pace, like a financial.
That's budgeting, right?
That's budgeting, and that's like they can change on that interval. If you look at fashion, that's maybe the fastest. It's twice a year, so there's a new fashion industry. If you look at cultures, maybe it's 1 generation of change, so maybe 20 to 30 years. So companies are ruled by the previous generation, right? But the work is done by the current generation. So the people you meet of companies are actually 1 generation behind the actual beliefs and cultural changes. So it takes 1 generation for a company culture to change. And this is also something, and this is why people perceive these companies as evil. It's the same as that, like if you smoked in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't seen as something bad.
Right.
Side anecdote, semantic stretching, like how words become, the meaning of words changes over time, like the word innovation. Innovation used to be a very neutral word, like in the 40s and 50s. Now it's a very positive word. It has a positive connotation. So if you do innovation, that's all we do, innovation. That's great. But then people don't realize cigarettes are also the result of innovation, right? But still it has a very positive connotation. End of the side action. This is also like how my brain works, very serendipity. How did we get here? Yeah, so the perception and perspective of people about themselves, but also about other people, like their social context, and about their environment changes. And this change doesn't happen over time. Like you don't, like fashion, you just go to the store, buy the new fashion stuff, and it changed. But these cultural changes just take longer to take part. And that's why you probably don't notice. But where you do notice is these like, oh, this company is evil. That's not evil. It's just what you're seeing is the cultural values of 30 years ago, which are perceived as evil now. So it takes a generation, because the people working at this company now, like your peers from your study, they will be the managers of like 20 years ahead.
So do you see Satelligence as like speeding up that process? Like, is that what you're trying to do?
Yes, very much. I had to think about it. I wanted to say no, not at all, because we're neutral and stuff, but we're not. And this is also, so we believe, if you should believe in change, right? Otherwise you shouldn't do it. If you want to stop deforestation, you can become cynical or nihilist, think, yeah, we'll never stop because the world is driven by money and political power, George Soros, Bill Gates. But it doesn't work like that. So you should believe in you should believe in the inherent, that's not English, but goodness of people. So people are inherently good. Like I never met anyone who is like pure evil. Most evil is clumsiness and naivety and stupidness. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the belief in that people will and can change. And you can do that by, that's why we took this stance. Like, you can't take the stance of Greenpeace or Mighty Earth, and we're friends with them. They have a good message and role, but it's not necessarily helping those like evil companies to change. So what we do is say, okay, you're very evil, but we can help you become a little bit less evil. But then,
I like the way that's phrased.
Yeah, this marketing people phrase it differently. That's not my expertise, but that's basically what we're doing. And yeah, this is something I find very heartwarming. Like all these so-called evil companies, there's only wonderful people working there who are really committed also to the same goals as you and me. Sorry, as me. I can't. I don't know what you think, Max. It's a mystery.
Maybe I am that pure evil that you're talking about.
Yes. The pure evil person is the person without an opinion. Like you, Max. Aviation engineers.
Yeah, that was a while ago, I guess. So
yeah.
I'm on the road for redemption.
Yeah.
So why is a data-driven approach the way to go? Like, this to me feels like it's a matter of telling stories. It's a matter, like you mentioned earlier, that what got you into that is like you went to Indonesia, you saw deforestation firsthand, and that got you. That's what made you want to solve that problem.
Yeah.
Do you think Like, why is it not that, taking those people from those evil companies and like going, let's go there together. Like, you'll see it and you'll have the same realization that I have. Do you think that's more effective than like using data and showing a plot?
No, but my point is then you don't have to do that because they already do that. So the people I talked about, they do go to the field. They know more than I do about, and they do have programs. A lot of these companies have social programs on the ground nowadays. So what they need is to convince their bosses. Right? And that's where the data comes in handy because like we like to say, I think the satellites don't have an opinion about the Earth, so they just see.
So they're evil
stuff. The satellites are like one of the most evil things ever created by man. This is a find. Already, it's the most productive podcast ever that I have been in. It's also the first, but yeah, satellites are pure evil.
So my point still holds. Like, why don't you take the boss there? Like. The person in charge, basically, like be it the person you directly talk to or the person who's like actually has the impact to do that.
Because it's recursive, right? The boss has to convince his boss, which is the shareholder, which is another abstract blurb who doesn't exist. So there's another thing. There's these companies that are evil, but only wonderful people. And the boss is also a wonderful person because his daughter is studying at Wageningen University and telling her dad, blah, blah, blah. But then he says, I can't, there's a shareholder meeting and I have to come up with these numbers. And that's where the data comes in. They can show, okay, this was happening. That's the beautiful thing about remote sensing. One of the beautiful things, especially satellite-based remote sensing. Everybody knows the scale story, and then most people think about spatial scaling, like, oh, we can see whole countries. But one of the most powerful things is that you can scale in time, and this is mostly overlooked. Like you have a time machine at your fingertips, so you can show even if your algorithm is wrong, it doesn't matter because it does matter, but it's less relevant because you can still see the trend, right? It goes up or down. And I think this is also the gap where remote sensing is very powerful. It's not so the gap between zero and one, like the biggest gap. It's one of those books with too many examples. I think it's Peter Thiel. Yeah. He's also evil, isn't he? Like
you tell me. You said nobody was.
I think I have to look at it, but I don't think he's. Anyway, so that's the biggest gap. And then this also, that's also why Satelligence is not focusing on the Netherlands. Like we couldn't do wonderful things in the Netherlands, and then there's this no-go area in the Netherlands, Noordoostpolder. I don't know if you know it.
No.
Every remote sensing company has this demo of this polder agricultural area in the Netherlands, which is like man-made. It's like God created the earth and then the Dutch created Holland. Well, part of that. It's like...
Oh, it's these like fields with like many different colors, right?
Yes,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
If you don't need algorithms for that.
Yeah, it's like
you can do it in
Microsoft
Paint can solve that. Like it doesn't count. Don't show that as a demo example. But anyway, so that's why that we don't add value as a remote sensing company. We think, especially what Satelligence does.
Also, like deforestation is not that big of a problem.
No, but the main point being is that Holland is one of the most densely censored or measured countries in the world. So what are you going to do? Go from 90 to 91% information? It's not really, but the whole of Africa, nobody knows anything. And there's you really fill an information gap that's very valuable. And so this is now, but especially how we got here, the historical information gap, so you can see what happened. So deforestation speeding up or speeding down, the influence of like a new commodity gets introduced, and how does that affect the deforestation patterns in a certain landscape? There's so much stuff that's unexplored and laying there for us to be discovered.
I want to get back to the shareholders part. As I guess a lot of people started looking into like how does the stock market works and trying to understand that at a high conceptual level. Because I think that's like one of the things I really took away from the time at Satelligence is like, yeah, wanting change is great, but like if there's no financial incentive, it's like good luck. How do you convince shareholders that all of this is worth taking attention to, like paying attention to, when all you see is like a line go up or down? And if you don't maximize profit, the company next to you has an incentive to do so because their line's going to go up higher than yours.
Yeah.
And if you're a shareholder and you want your line to go up, you better invest in that company.
Yeah.
How do you solve that problem and say like, wait, actually, it's more complicated than that?
It's actually, the basis is very easy. It's about survivability. So before optimizing profit, you have to exist, right?
And be there in 10 years.
Yeah.
Got it.
That's the shortest answer. And then it's about horizons. So the problem with a lot of like capitalism, overheated capitalism, is that the horizons are too short. If you would think in 10, 20, 30 year horizons, the shareholders would also act differently. This is happening as well. So sustainability has been like seen as a liability, something that costs money, maybe to be ignored or greenwashed or put away in the corner. But companies are increasingly starting to become aware that if you do not run your company sustainably, you will not have a company anymore in 20 or 30 years. So it becomes a condition for sustainability.
Right.
And I think more and more at the core, at the strategic level of organizations.
So it still is like a financial incentive that's just moved along. Like the reason I'm asking that is I hear a lot of people saying like profit maximizing is like, first of all, like making a profit is bad and then profit maximizing is bad. The way I understand it is you're saying it's just like you're just still seeing it through the same lens, except you're looking way further.
Yeah, well, this is part of it. So one of the problems with, let's call it a neoliberal disease.
Okay.
It's a disease, Max.
Can you expand why?
Yeah, because it's like taking an idea which is at root not bad, but then extrapolating it into ridiculous levels. Also in Holland, where like everything got privatized and the market solves everything. It's reductionism. So right. This is the problem. So the problem is not that you maximize profit. The problem is that you only use one criterion to judge the success of your company or society. That's the problem. Because if you, and this is also, it's a false dichotomy. It's not that, oh, we should let go of profit maximizing and we should focus on maximizing biodiversity. That's also wrong. So you should, and that's the beauty of the model of Kate Raworth, the donut economy. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
No, I'm not familiar. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I'm not like, I didn't read the book yet, but it's quite simple. So before there was, economists were very much only focused on financial gain, so profit maximizing. And Raworth says there's a bottom line, like you don't want people to be in poverty, so there's like a minimum line of income and stuff people need, so you should meet that. But there's also a ceiling.
Right.
And there's donuts, so you have two concentric circles. So there's the bottom line where you don't want to go below because you get into poverty and terrible things. But there's also a ceiling, and that's the ecological, capacity of a society. And this has been lacking in any other economic theory. So there's no ceiling, nothing right. pushing back this economic pressure.
So how do you enforce something like that, though? Like, who puts that limit? Where do you put that limit?
where you put the limit. So this can be very, let's say, scientific. So you could look at, for example, environmental health or public health. So it is
Right.
like there are laws for health, air pollution in the Netherlands, for example. So you could do that. But this is something that should evolve, and it also involves a lot of democratic processes, cultural willingness, and maybe the donut looks different in India than in the Netherlands. And that's the neoliberal is like this one criteria, profit maximizing, and it's the same over the whole globe. And then you get these excesses.
So let's get back to Satelligence. How does Satelligence make money, like at a high level?
By charging more for our products than it costs, Max.
Oh, damn it, that was a stupid question. But like, how do you make sure you're still there, and like to follow up on that conversation? How do you make sure in 10 years you're still there? Because if you want to stop deforestation in 10 years, we're still going to need people to be there to work on that. Like, how are you thinking about that?
Us as a company?
Yeah.
Well, this is something that maybe...
Or is that even the right question to ask?
I don't know. But it's maybe that I told you before, like I hardly do any planning in my life. But I do get this sense, like there's these patterns that you pick up, and then you start applying them, and these patterns become, on the one hand, more detailed, but on the other hand, also more abstract, so more applicable to broader territories. And this makes, like, this is how humans, this is how you progress. If you're a kid, you're obsessed with your Lego and stuff, and then you get older and you get bigger and bigger pictures, you learn abstractions. So this is also how I do it. And also because the world is so volatile, it would be pretentious if you would claim to be able to predict more than 1 year ahead.
Right.
So what you do is, like, or what we do, we have this like abstract mission, zero deforestation, but there's also stuff that's happening at different paces. And then what you should try to aim for is build an organization that is like can maximize learning, right? So you pick up the new stuff, you adapt a little bit, and you move on.
Right.
So this is also my personal goal for Satelligence. So maybe we're not a deforestation monitoring company anymore in 10 years. Right. I don't know.
Got it.
Very probable we will be in the environmental, biological, nature-based field. Highly probable. But maybe deforestation is solved. Let's be positive, right? Because we can state for sure that if we would only do and forever zero deforestation or deforestation monitoring, I don't think we would survive.
How so?
Well, there's too many factors. Like there's the thing that, okay, maybe humanity solves deforestation, then why would we be there?
Right.
That's one thing. Like the problem is not the problem anymore, but the other is more classic. What's it called? Markets that are maturing. So after a while,
right,
they become standards and ways of doing things, and then you get competitors that focus on different strategies. Like we are very much focused on customer intimacy, understanding the customers, and maybe a bit of product leadership. But after a while, this will be figured out, and then you get the operational excellence companies, and they just go for cost-based pricing, cut all the margins, and outcompete us because the incumbents are there.
Right. You know? So the zero deforestation is like is kind of the fit that you found between the skills that you have and the problem that you're seeing. And so that's the thing that you're working on for like the foreseeable future, but that's totally up for change.
Yes. And the thing is, I'm not saying we won't do it. The thing is, I don't know.
That's what that's how I understand it. It's not like this is what's going to happen.
I'm thinking about the audience.
Yeah, they're smart. They'll figure it out. It's about like adapting to the change then. Like,
Okay.
So one thing I wanted to touch upon is, if I understood correctly, I think last time we talked, you told me that you guys took funding for the first time. Did I get that right?
Yes. Maybe, yeah. So we would like to, like in America, there's the angel investors and the whole, what's it called, investment ecology. Very much, if you have charisma, if you have a good story, you can pitch, you have some sense of market, you can collect money and start a business. In Europe, we have government. So especially, there's a lot of EU grants that you can use to kickstart your company. There's a lot of ESA grants.
Yeah.
There's a lot of country-specific grants, and then this is where like the countries between or within Europe, the differences between countries, like Dutch are very Puritan and the government is very neutral to companies and want to give all a chance. In France, it's much more from a vision, and they say, okay, we're going to pick the winner and support them and build a big player out of that. So that's a difference. But in Europe, as a startup company, it's pretty easy to get started with, let's say, cheap money. Like there's no obligations. You don't have to provide equity. You just have to hand in tons of paperwork. But
So that's from the government, like they.
Yeah, and this can be like European government or a space agency or national government or maybe even local government. So there's a huge difference between Europe and the States in that. So we started classically with this money. The problem in Europe is that oftentimes the conditions or requirements for these grants are very low. So there's a lot of people who made these grants their business model. So the grant ends, the project ends, you go to the next grant. That's great. You have a decent salary, you have a nice company, but it doesn't make
You're not going anywhere.
No. It doesn't. So I think the technical term is rent seeker. So it doesn't produce any economically viable product. So we were there, but then we had the explicit mission. Okay, we want to, Satelligence exists for the private market. So we only do 100% of our sales effort goes to the private sector, and we do get grants, but that's all passive acquisition. Like it comes anyway. So this is the classic model, and we were going along fine until suddenly people start calling you. They say, "Hey, Arjen, this is Pete from blah 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 impact blah 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 investment disruptors game changer Inc." I said, "Okay, how are you doing? Why are you calling me? Why would we be interesting?" And this is like how I see myself. Why would anyone be interested in me? And then I also, why would they be interested in our company? So, oh yeah, no, this and that. And then maybe this is a nice example also of the way I think. So first I think, why would they be interested in me or in our company? But on the other hand, I'm super curious. Like, whoa, a new field. Let's see what they actually do. So you invite them over, you have a nice chat, you think these are actually really nice people. They don't look like the Wolf of Wall Street, right? So also slight disappointment. But anyway, that's the first. So these are also nice people, and they just have they have a mission and a job, and they do acquisition. And then you notice something called due diligence. Like before, I thought this whole investment game was like a crystal ball, mythical, like wizard that would handpick unicorns, but it's not like that at all. Like there's a very thorough pseudo-scientific selection method. It's at least so to get at least rid of the crap. And then we thought, okay, that's interesting. And so that's what you learn. But then in addition to that, I learned that investors, so they don't only bring a bag of money. That's nice, but that's actually, only a small part of it. There's also other things that they bring. One of it is experience and coaching. So this is what they do. So they have a lot of companies like you in their portfolio. So you can learn a lot about general company building things. So that's really nice. And the other thing is the message to the market, because why would a big bank get involved with 20 idiots in an office in Utrecht? Super high risk. But if you're backed by an investor, the bank, it's a signal to the bank that at least someone did due diligence.
Right.
And that's like a hidden message to the market. Oh, those guys have an investor. And the banks know, or the prospect know that the investor is not a wizard. They did some due diligence. So it gives you a kind of stamp of credibility. So that's one thing. The other thing is that once you're less likely to disappear, to go bankrupt.
Right.
So these are all things that we learned. And then apart from that, we got like our current investor. They're really nice people, and we really got a good connection with them. So we decided to go ahead, and that's how we picked up our first round of funding.
So what were there any downsides to doing that? Because like one of the, I think if I oversimplify it, you hear this where, the mission gets derailed by what investors want. Like, is that a concern?
Yeah, that's maybe another thing I didn't touch upon yet. Like there's no such thing as the investor. There's many kinds of investors. That's what I learned. So you can have the typical, let's say, Silicon Valley hawk type, who only look at the financials, and they will push you hard to get multiples every year. So if you don't double the revenue every year, you're just out of the game. They will put a new CEO in. They put pressure. This on the one extreme, and then on the other extreme, let's say the EU grants, who are too lean, and then in between there's everything. Yeah. And then I'm surprised by not surprised, but like in our case, the investors, it's more that they are like coaching and suggesting,
right? Okay.
But it's not like they don't put a lot of pressure on you should do this.
But like, is that
But there is like, but it could be that you meet the wrong investor,
right,
and then things can go wrong. I can totally see that happening. Mm-hmm. Like your friends, and this is also like, I don't know. You know who your friends are in bad times, right? So if all the graphs go up, any investor is happy and easy to work with. Right. What do you do if you get into dire straits?
Like that's easy when like everything's going well.
Yes.
But like we were talking about the horizon timeline. Like, is that something that you looked for, where you want people who are seeing things on the same horizon as you are?
Yeah. So one of the things that the biggest doubt we had, Niels and I, about investment is this thing called exit strategy.
Yeah.
People thought, what's your exit strategy? And we would look at them, what are you talking about? We never thought about this. I work at Satelligence and Niels as well because we enjoy working with each other and also with remote sensing and people. We don't think about, in 7 years we want to sell the company, because then never, 0 seconds thought. But then you get investors and so we ask investors, what's your exit strategy? Because the world doesn't have an exit strategy, right? We are for zero deforestation. There's no exit strategy for the world. We don't have it. But then they are actually quite nuanced, and also you learn that in the exit strategies, there's not just one thing like an IPO or a buyout. There's other options as well. But this is a big consideration, and this is where things can heat up. Like, and I think for most investors, the timeline is between 5 to 7 years,
Right.
which is okay-ish. You would, maybe 10 to 15 years will be nicer. But then, they also have their own world of, that's how things go.
Right.
So, yeah.
So what are some of those other exit? Like, because that is something I've wondered, like, quite naively, you hear about these things. You're like, okay, so you invest, there's like these stages, A, B, C, all that. And then there's exit. And then it feels like, you roll the credits and it's done and you move on to the next. But it feels like, wait, like what about the mission that you're trying to do? So can you help me
imagine, so one possible thing could be that, so the classic thing is you have an IPO, so you sell all your shares and then you get rich, or not rich because the market crashes. That's something, like, we did a 10 million IPO and then one day later it's worth 5 million and then 2 million. So never get paid in shares, always ask for cash. So there's one thing. Another thing could be a buyout or a takeover.
Right.
Like Vander said.
Yeah. Acquired by a Planet recently, right?
So they got partly paid in cash and partly in shares.
Right.
There's a reason for that. But so that could be the takeover. Maybe a funny story. So I was in the car with Niels and we were just chit-chatting on the highway. And I don't know if Niels brought it up or I, and we said, what would we do if Planet would want to buy us? And we didn't know. And our biggest concern would be culture.
Right.
We are unique, just like everyone else. And what would happen if all these American sharks buy you and do stuff? And then 1 week later, the news broke. Van der Sat got acquired by Planet.
They're also Dutch, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And we know the guys.
Very suspicious.
Super nice guys. And we've been talking, you just informally, everybody knows each other.
Yeah. It's a small country,
so,
right?
And then it's suddenly, like the week before in the car, we discussed it as a hypothetical thing, like this will never happen. And then 1 week later, they got acquired, and then it becomes super okay, it can happen.
Right. So do you know, did you come up with, or do you feel comfortable about talking about it or something, or?
Sure, but this is the wrong question.
Right.
I feel comfortable talking about anything.
I mean, that's the thing. I'm gonna ask a bunch of questions. So you set the limit to where you want things.
Exactly.
To happen.
No, that's fine. And or you want to know what our answer was to if we then. Yeah, so if we talk about these things, or I at least, there's a few scenarios, there's not, in the easy to think about these things also for yourself. This is one of the patterns maybe that I apply. So you said, okay, let's polarize the problem, right? So, okay, there's this big corp and they're going to acquire Satelligence. Then scenario number one, they're going to offer $100 million. Immediately sell. If they're idiots that don't get in the way if people are running their idiot plans. So
they have a big pile of cash, you might as well.
So they take the cash, start another company with the cash, hire all your colleagues back and have fun. Oh, but you can't legally do that. Hey, you got 50 million, you can buy a lawyer. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is they say, we have $100,000. So these are the point being, it can be too high or too low, and that's easy. You don't do it. And then you get into this region where it's okay, this is a good offer. And then the other stuff comes, what do you want? And then we didn't have there was no conclusion from our conversation. Right. But the biggest concern I can say was that we had was culture.
I want to go there. I want to go on the culture because like we did touch upon that. Like I still think like it was a lot of fun to work here. And like just every time I come back, it's like it's a lot of fun. And I know that you guys get a lot of stuff done as well. Like how do you build that company culture? Also because like you're the boss. So you kind of set the tone.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that I very, very consciously thought about, company culture. And this is also something that I advise anyone early in their career to switch a few times. I think you also saw it, right? You work with us, you work with ISI, you work with Overstory now. I think you also had fun in every company.
Yeah, but it is like night and day.
Exactly. So then you learn to see pros and cons, and also that it's, you know, it can be the wrong time, you can be in the wrong team or in the perfect team. It can be you as a human personality. Maybe at some point you have kids. Like there's a lot of factors, but then you learn that there's no like golden solution for everyone forever. So this is a nice thing to see. So I thought, okay, if I'm gonna be the boss or one of the directors of a company, at least I want to have fun, right? That's the least I can do. And then working in other companies before, there was like, I got a lot of feedback. We're in Holland, so we like to talk. So we do we are very direct. So we are not afraid to give negative feedback or direct feedback. So we do a lot of that in work settings. And then mostly, like consistently, I got positive feedback. Like people enjoy working with me. I don't know why. Well, I do know, but you know.
Why?
I think because I bring a mix of like, I'm not stupid. You can count on me. Like, if you ask me to do something, I will do it. The quality will always be, I say, a 6. So it will be good enough. I'm not the best in anything. If you're looking for the best, don't pick me. But in most things, I'm better than most people, right? So maybe someone is a 9 or an 8, but I'm consistently 6.5 in everything. So I beat you always at some point.
Right.
So that's my strength. The range, right?
Yeah.
The range book. Oh, it's about me, but you thought the same, and you're different than me. It's like horoscopes. Anyway,
that's the book by David Epstein, right?
Yeah. So and I think so. This is part, and then because I don't think life very seriously, and not myself. So there's like one big. If you're in an office with me, it's a theater 8 hours a day, right? When I enter the room, it just starts.
Is that why people are still remote? Do you think?
Sorry?
Is that why half the team is still remote?
Yeah, 100% sure. Yes. They were very happy to do so. So that's why people like... So I have a pretty decent idea of how a fun working environment look like.
Yeah.
Because if you only make jokes and stuff, then you become a clown. And people... Yeah, so there should be the balance. So you should bring some value. And then I think also the way my knowledge is on one end very abstract and broad, but also very detailed. Like I know Linux, and you get stuck and they say, oh, try this and this. And that brings respect, and people think, oh, he can actually do stuff. So I brought these things and we started a company, and then I thought, okay, one thing is just be yourself, like myself. And it's also easy because it's the only thing I can do. So it's not that I have a choice. But the other thing is also like team building is also about like lunch is much more important for your culture than your strategy day.
Yeah.
So what I did was, okay, we're going to have stand-up. So we do the basic agile scrum thing. We're going to have stand-up at 12:15 every day for 15 minutes, which means everybody is finished at 12:30. So everybody's ready for lunch. Everybody starts eating lunch at the same time. And this is super important, and maybe people missed it, but very conscious, because before I worked at companies and then lunch is between 11:30 and 1:30, right? So the early birds, I have a meeting at 1, so they go early, and then there's other people come, let me finish this, and so people come in scattered, and then there's half overlaps, and that's not how you build this. There's the lone wolf eating the last sandwich in the canteen. You want everybody together. So this is one of thing like a simple thing, which has a huge impact. So everybody eats lunch every day together. And that's how you build culture. And then after a while, you get the culture and you can't get rid of it. So this is something I learned in actually the second company I worked. So we were working there. It was a education tech company. And there were a lot of people from education. Also a lot of, let's say, senior people. In age, and they used to work in education, and in education in Holland, your day finishes at 2 or 3. So a lot of those people would be gone around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. They were productive, but then the technical people would be in an empty building.
Right.
After 4, it would be empty, and this there was a mismatch in ambition or how people. Like you're working on this deadline, okay, let's finish it, and then your colleague just say, I go home. There's a mismatch there. So there was this group of people, mostly younger people, that wanted to change something and see how we can get everybody on board, because there were enough, 5 to 10 people who were willing to change. But then one of the more senior guys sat with us in one of these pizza voluntarily gatherings, and he said every company gets the culture it deserves, and once you have the culture it deserves, it's super hard to change, even if you want. So this is something I remembered. I remembered when start joining your own company, that if you want a culture, you should start early, and the golden thing: be consistent. Right. That's why strategy days don't work. It's fun. You hang out and, but then the next day, we should be smart, SMART. Everybody agrees. One day later, nobody's smart anymore.
It's like going on a diet. It's like...
Exactly. So that's how you build company culture, by small things, and first and foremost, be consistent and coherent.
So the last 2 years have been pretty fun. How have you handled COVID and just going remote? You guys have multiple offices now.
Yeah.
You got people all around the world, not even on the same time zone. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So the thing is that the transition to remote only went super smooth for us. And this is exactly because of the reasons that you just stated. Before COVID, we already had remote offices. We were already used to doing stand-ups with one guy remote. And all the infrastructure and all the tooling was already focused on, was not depending on people being physically together. But we didn't realize that until COVID came. Yeah. And then actually people start asking, how do you do this? And how did the transition go? And then I thought we didn't have any problems. It went super smooth. And then I started to realize there were a lot of companies that had these hidden dependencies, and had, especially in traditional fields like legal, they have no idea what to do at home. And also the lack of trust. Right. Maybe this is something that I'm super naive. Like I said, I believe everybody is good, but it never once crossed my mind. And I'm also sure all the team leads and the people, there's a super high level of trust within our company. But it's not we didn't, I don't have a trust program. It's just there.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But you were talking about the lunch being a really important moment. Because it is like, to set a big context, like there's this really big table where everybody, I don't know still if everybody can fit, but like, at least when I was there, like everybody can fit, and it's just like a really big table, and there's no, like, just people sit and eat. How do you, like, because you can't really do that anymore.
No.
And like people don't really want to have lunch in front of their computer either, I guess. Yeah. So how did you, like, specifically for that? Did you find like something else that worked, or yeah?
So this was my personal biggest concern, and also I think where we failed most. These are the things that are almost irreplaceable. So functionally the transition was like super smooth. Like everything got much more efficient. I never saw, like, maybe people don't remember, but pre-COVID, meetings would start between 5 to and 10 past, right? Of the intended start. In COVID time, since COVID, every meeting starts exactly at the moment. And maybe someone is 1 minute late because the camera doesn't work or whatever. But so it becomes super efficient and functional, but also very sterile, right? And this is the thing. So we did a few experiments. We had online games,
right?
But then, it becomes a bit of like organized fun. It's not like politeness from a book. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Indeed. But so these are the things that worked a bit, but I think one of the things that there's in the chat groups, there's a social chat and memes going on, but it's not the same. And we did, like, we have coffee chats, which is like people sign up, and then there's someone assigning people randomly but then still it's like planned spontaneity or spontaneity. So that's the most difficult thing. But then, the basis where we're coming from was luckily good enough for people to still keep the culture somehow. But this is one of the unsolved things to me. So this is also for me the biggest barrier, or I would say, to like these companies like GitLab that are remote first or remote only. Then this stuff, and then you see them, we have great gaming night, and I see the saddest picture of this screenshot carousel with people with plastic smiles, or that's how I perceive it. There's no sadder picture. And I'm sure they have fun. They're nerds, but
but it's also not for everybody, right? Like lunch is for everybody.
It's so we pre-COVID we had game night. You were there, and then that's pretty. I still remember. That's also
But that was in person.
That wasn't but I'm just now starting to analyze. Like, we did a game. You never did the game, but you immediately won. Splendor.
Yeah.
And then I saw the approach that you have. You as also like a super nerd, immediately start analyzing the mechanics and resource optimization. So without ever playing it, said this must be the most optimal strategy. And I'm a much more romantic. Like, I get into the theme and think, this, and then I got beaten by this this evil, opinionless person.
Yeah, that was fun. I want to move on to, like, so we've set the tone about like how the culture goes, and how do you hire people? Like, how do you build that team? Like, you say you have that culture set in very early, and then the company grows, you bring in people when some people leave and things like that. And how do you hire? How have you built the team that you have right now?
That's so this is indeed part of it. Then if you look at the company now, and the people say, whoa, all these people who are like this great fit together, and see, that's survivor bias.
Okay, so you get a bunch of people in and you kind of see who sticks.
Basically.
Right.
It's not true, because the survivor bias is also in the interview process. So you get 40 letters in, and then we have a process of, we select the best letters, or that we think fit best. with multiple people.
Yeah.
And then we have, I don't know, between 5 and 10 candidates. We do a first round, which is very informal, like we are talking now about anything. Then we select the promising candidates, and we ask them to do a practical assessment. You did it for so we also do this for interns. And it's not a test that you can pass or fail. It's just the way we want you to see how do you approach problems, how do you document your assumptions, how do you deal with sometimes we put unsolvable paradoxes in there. So that gives a pretty good insight. And also, some people are, you are very expressive and comfortably to communicate verbally. Some people are not like that, and they are much more expressive written. So you don't want to bias one over the other. And then there's a second interview, and mostly you talk about the assessment. And then usually then you talk to 4 different people of the company. Like 2 in the first interview, 2 other people in the second interview. Right. And then after the second interview, we do, everyone writes their top 3 candidates on a paper, and then we show the paper to each other.
Right.
And then mostly it aligns. So this is the selection process. But then this is also how you create bias. Because of course, if I like the person, I'm working with a person that I like working with, and they like working with me. So both probably we like the same kind of person. So that's probably why there is a bias in our selection process. And I don't think maybe semantic stretching. So innovation is a very positive connotation, but bias has a very negative connotation. Think about it.
So you were going to say you don't think it's a bad thing?
I don't know. This is the first time I think about the word bias. Why does it have... I now realize it has a negative connotation, but does it... I don't see any reason why. I think there's also... there can be positive stuff in it, from an evolutionary perspective.
It's very useful in a way to have a made-up opinion on something.
And then maybe in this case, if you have your company culture, if you would have a completely unbiased selection process, there would certainly be people that would be no fit for your company. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things that come from bias is not trying to remove them, but being aware of them.
Absolutely.
And then as you said, if you were to remove it completely, I don't know if that would work in the end.
It's a lot of these things also stereotypes. So
exactly.
Dutch, and then most stereotypes are true. They have a basis. And then it's just be aware of it and don't let it limit or block your view.
Right.
Be prepared to be disproven. So that's I think also one of my basic approaches. You have these categories and stuff, but realize the map is not the territory. And the map is very useful, but don't turn it around.
Right. I wanted to ask this question, why did you hire me when I applied for the internship? And I want to explain why. Because, I think I would have really liked to hear that, early on, it's kind of okay to change fields and go for something else. And I had enormous imposter syndrome because I was as we touched on, I studied aerospace mechanical engineering, nothing about remote sensing or programming or whatever. And I just took some courses and did a bunch of stuff. And I think I was really stressed on those interviews, and it, as far as I can tell, it went pretty well.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and also the way we're talking about patterns. So this is also when I interview people for so you hire for talent, not for skills. That's what it comes down to, especially for internships. Right. You look more at attitude, commitment, enthusiasm, than for, if they can, no intern has 10 years of programming experience, right? So it's a no-go. And also from interns, we want them, like we treat them like normal employees. You are treated exactly the same as all employees, but we don't expect anything from you in the positive sense of the word. Like the company's success doesn't depend on you. And in the positive, if you contribute stuff, that's great. But if it's a complete failure or like not what we expected, that's also fine. As long as you had fun and you learned a lot, that will be fine. So that's how we approach interns. But then as interns, you even more look at like talent, commitment, and enthusiasm than skill. That would be more like if there would be a list of tasks that you want solved, you hire a temporary student and say, okay, here's this amount per hour, please fix this.
Right.
And then why we selected you. So first, we are still relatively small, about 25 people, so we can't have 10 interns at the same time.
Yeah.
That would be too big cost on the rest of the company. So we have 2 to 3 intern positions in the technical teams at the same time. And so you wrote an application. And first of all, the form was really nice. So I'm a romantic person, and I'm very sensitive to form. Like if something looks nice, or you put in effort, and then you put this blueprint of a rocket. So I think everybody can testify that. So I received this thing. So before even replying to you, I showed this thing to everybody in my direct 10-meter circle. So look at this. This is great. And whoa. So that's number one. So then we have an interview. And then basically it's, well, I'm also... So when you're interviewing people, I'm not looking for points to turn people down or dismiss people, but look for their talent. Like where do they shine? When does the smile come to their face? Where's their talent? And there might be a hidden talent, and try to see how that talent can contribute to the team or to the company. That's also with job openings. So you put out a job opening with this bullet points list of a person that doesn't exist. Yeah, that's where the imposter syndrome comes from, because of bullshit job openings. And then you do interviews, and then maybe sometimes you find a person that you think this is a great person, but it's actually not, quite what we were looking for. But then you hire them, and then after you hire a person, you start looking where is the best fit for this person within the company, which might be something completely different from the original opening. And this is basically also what we do with interns, like Niklas, the German guy. He started doing soil classification. He ended up reprogramming a dynamic time warping module in our classification software package, right? And he deeply enjoyed it. And for you as well, so there's this guy who does aerospace engineering. Then already applying to us, you get bonus points for stepping out of your comfort zone. Right. Or for me personally. Then we do the interviews. I remember we had the assessment, and then you were still lost in the Microsoft world. Let's have a moment of silence.
Yeah, I think there was like 5 back and forth emails on how do you get Docker to work on
and
Windows.
The thing is that I want to help everybody, and I felt deep sympathy because we had this assessment with, like, usually if you do Python programming, the dependency management is hell. So we thought, let's help people. Let's make a Docker where the whole environment is available so they don't have to worry about that. Then the Docker becomes the problem. Right, Max? And then the problem is you're on Windows, which I didn't use for 20 years for a reason. And you come with these questions that I can't debug. Like, I can only guess. Luckily, at that time, we had our friend Dimitri, who was more enlightened, I must say, than me, because he's from a world where there's no Windows, Linux fight anymore. Like, it completely disappeared. There's the days of the other Steve. Another anecdote. Steve Jobs is like this mythical, like, whoa, guru and half godlike person. And then I wrote somewhere that the other Steve, like the Microsoft Steve, his last name slipped my mind, Steve Ballmer. Do you know him?
No, I think
maybe
the name,
not, but like
the name.
He was the CEO, I think, after Bill Gates, but Bill Gates was still on. And this Steve Ballmer was like personified capitalism, and he was
I think that's
to this super charismatic meetings for developers, sweating like a pig. And then he literally called Linux a cancer. So he saw it as the enemy.
Okay.
Now Microsoft is the biggest contributor to the Linux kernel.
Yeah.
Because of cloud, Azure, they need it. So this completely changed. But what I was hinting at, so there's this godlike image of Steve Jobs. But then I read somewhere, pick any business metric, right? Revenue, number of people, sales, and Steve Ballmer scores better than Steve Jobs.
Right.
But he doesn't have this image at all. Like, he has a very bad image. So this is also something like we create our gods. Wasn't there's like, I don't know, in the geospatial Twitter, like we don't have these things in the geospatial space, like these icons.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm like surprised by.
Yeah, I think that's also why I really like this geospatial company. It's very equalitarian, and people are approachable, and they're very respectful. Like the few, like we do have the icons, but they are very humble and approachable and not pretentious. For example, Paul Ramsey, Frank Wermerdam, people like that. Yeah. How did we get here?
The Docker.
Docker, yes. So I'm from the Steve Ballmer age, and then Linux was like you're on the good side. But then you were, and then you made all this effort, and then I thought, okay, this is a guy who's committed, and maybe a bit too committed. You know, the rabbit hole. Yeah, and it showed in your internship as well. And then, maybe we can try this. 2 months later.
That hasn't really changed much, by the way.
Yeah, but anyway, so this is that's why we hired would seem a bit selected you. Yeah, and it worked out fine, didn't it?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I'm still like, what I wanted to mention on that, because I am really grateful for that, because it is what got me the foot in the door. Like, it feels like forever ago now that
it does. Also off. Because of this abyss of COVID is in between. It's a divide.
Exactly.
It feels like a divide in time, the pre and post. Yeah.
But I think like I hope that like stories like this help like people take a shot at stuff. Yeah. That like, because I felt like, whoa, this was the weirdest thing ever to like change fields like that and go in something else. But as I'm having these conversations, I'm realizing that it's actually everybody's stories like that. Everybody's changed a billion times and doesn't know what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So we also had this intern before you, Yip, and she was like a super talented, smart girl, and she started working for us as an intern, and I think she enjoyed. But with us, she found that programming is not for her. She was good at it, but she found like I don't really want to do this. So she went for a consultancy kind of job. So that's what you do during internships.
So back to the exploring a lot. Early on.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to fail. That's also like the imposter syndrome. I think everybody can resonate with that. The first time I read it, like okay, that's like I have that a lot. But it's like myself. The way I think about myself is like I don't have a very high esteem of myself. But then the result is that I'm like, there's nothing to lose. Like you would say that I get insecure, but it's the opposite. I get confident because I think, who cares? Like I'm at zero. What's the worst thing that can happen? I can't sink any further, so why not try? And the paradox is that often you get like positive feedback for trying, and then that's how you build up confidence without realizing.
Right.
So the starting point of a lot of people who look confident, maybe that's not like, it's not what's it called, a genetic thing or something. It's like in my case, it's not from that I come from a confidence energy place or something. So in my case, it was from just a lack of self-esteem as, who cares? Like nothing. What's the worst thing that can happen?
I wanted to touch on like open source a bit. We talked about Linux, but one of the things, like for me, it was just like working at Satelligence where I realized that, oh my God, you can build like a whole company based on open source stuff. Like I think most of the tech when I was there, I don't know now, but was running Linux. We were using QGIS and like just everything Python, and like just everything's built on open source. Why? Like that's not the case in every industry. Like there's a bunch of other stuff where, you know, it's like everything is on Microsoft and it's just proprietary software and people get job done. Do you have any idea why this field is like so prominent on geospatial? And I'm let's say on the like remote sensing, because then there's like the whole ArcGIS, but that's more on, you know, the GIS stuff. It's just, I think, quite different.
Yeah. I have no idea, but I can give another anecdote of how we got to open source.
Yeah.
So I was working for this company, Sarvision, the first company I worked for, who was like, my boss was my thesis supervisor, and he had this company on the side. And at that time, the technical field was very much dominated by licensed proprietary software. So let's say for the engineering people, there's MATLAB. Yeah. So we didn't use lab, just as an example, and there was Esri on the GIS side, and then we used a program called Envy, I think. Yeah. Okay. ENVI. And they had this programming language called IDL, Integrated Data Language or something. And then we had a floating license in the company. So we paid, and then, I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000, like these crazy expensive licenses to be able to use this programming language. And the language was optimized for remote sensing, so super easy to open stuff, process your stuff. And then there's actually two reasons why we were moving to open source. And one of the things being is that, so I was working with Vincent, who still works with us now. Like, we started at the same day. And we were working on Windows computers, which was fine, with like 1 gigabyte hard disks, and this is a long time ago. And then Vincent said, my roommate is using Linux. And this sounded like this obscure, high-tech, tech bro stuff before tech bro was a thing. And then he said, I tried it, and I got this micro optimization for this and this. And we were like, we're shit. So I thought, I also need that. So I got this huge box of SUSE with 8 CDs with Linux on it. So that's how we got into Linux.
Right.
And at that time, Linux was like not user-friendly at all.
So can you, by the way, when is at that time, like just, when are we talking about?
This is in 2002.
Okay.
So this is when I started working for Sarvision. So we started using Linux because it was more memory efficient, and we could process bigger files, bigger satellite images. And IDL happened to run on Linux, the programming language, everything going fine. We built our own software, and our client at the time was an Indonesian NGO based in Indonesia, and this was before the cloud, right? The cloud didn't exist. There was internet, but you used it to send email and read spam. And at that time, so in the I worked in tropical land use, and at that time the term knowledge transfer was like super popular, and if you didn't do that, you would be neo-colonialist. Nowadays, knowledge transfer is considered itself to be a neo-colonialist term, so you can't use that term anymore. But anyway, at that time there was knowledge transfer, so you weren't supposed to run the algorithms on your desktop computer in the Netherlands. It should be run in a local computing center in Indonesia. So we flew there, brought the computer, installed everything, and started running. But then there's IDL, who requires a license, and there's just within that project or client, they don't have the budget to pay for that license. So we had to find an alternative. And then again, Vincent, he found this thing called numeric. And there was the other thing which now slipped my mind by Travis Oliphant, like this level of Paul Ramsey. So he created numeric and numeray. There was like two competing libraries for numerical computing. And then he found it, and we could almost copy paste our IDL code to Python, to this numeric and numeray code. And it was free. You didn't need a license. So that's how I and Vincent got into using Python and open source. We even donated to Travis Oliphant. Like, he wrote this book about it, and you could buy it, and that's how he financed his work. Later, numeric and numeray merged into NumPy, what is now NumPy. But you should realize there was like two competing APIs for the same thing. And it's, if you look at NumPy, sometimes you think, why is this like strange? That's the reason is why it used to be two different libraries. So that's how we got into that. And then slowly the cloud was coming, and then the cloud de facto runs on Linux and open source, and then I think you get into this domino or accelerating effect. But for Geospatial, I think maybe also because of this Esri being the incumbent, so they have a disadvantage because they are big on desktop, so they focus on desktop, while the rest of the world was taking over in the right lane with the cloud. And then there was no like RGIS in the cloud. They built it much later after the party already started a long time ago. And then in the cloud there were all these like super lightweight tooling libraries like Google and Ogre and Geos and Postgres on the bigger stuff, SQLite, that were running the show.
I think it took me like a few months to realize that Google and GDAL were the same thing.
Yeah. You're not like, I'm Dutch, so we say GDAL.
Oh God.
GDAL. And so me and Vincent and I would say, did you... so compiling GDAL was like daily business because, of course, we wanted the latest stuff. This was way before we knew about versioning, deployment, all that stuff. So we found this Linux distribution called Gen 2. I don't know if you're familiar.
I've heard about it.
It's cool because it's super optimized because you compile everything on your hardware. So it's like 0.3 and 53% faster than anything. So we need that. And you should realize I used KDE at the time.
Right.
So there's a bug fix for KDE. You had to recompile everything. So we would like 20% of our productive work, we were recompiling packages in Gen 2. And this is on our desktop computers. We also had a server in a data center, and we ran Gen 2 on that server together with, so at that time there were, for serving maps in the cloud, there was map server and GeoServer. And map server was really good in, raster. But at that time we also needed a solution for vector. And then this is maybe a thing you recognize from open source. So you're working on this problem, and then there's this like almost this problem that like almost fixed, and then some magic happens and someone released it either as a library or as a feature in the library. The only thing, it's alpha bleeding edge, blah, blah, blah. But you don't realize, so you just install, it works, and go on. So there was this GeoServer thing coming from Italian guys. And Vincent said, oh, it's GeoServer, let's install it. So he installed it on the web server on Gen 2, and everything worked fine. But then we found that our server, it worked perfectly, but then it got slower and slower and slower. And then in hindsight now, I think, okay, memory leak indeed. So after a while, we couldn't even SSH into the server anymore.
Wow.
So we had to drive by car to Amsterdam to the data center to physically enter the server and reinstall the thing. Vincent found the problem, reported it to the GeoServer guys, and they fixed it. They said thank you. But then, so this was us finding out why maybe alpha bleeding edge version is not such a good idea to run in a production server. Grandpa tells. And this is the stuff like, in my life, I never had a kind of mentor or a senior person that was helping me. And that's how you feel about yourself all the time until you get like interns like Max and you're struggling with, Arjen, I can't run this. And then I look over your shoulder and you say, change mod 777, and then whoa, it works. So
Yeah.
I tell you, and you get going in 1 minute. This took me 1 week,
Right.
20 years ago to find out. Yeah.
That's why mentoring is pretty cool.
I know. So still looking for a mentor. So my mentor is failure.
That's a great, like, that sticks though. Like,
Yeah.
because that thing that you found, I think like when you struggle, like when you put effort into finding something, I feel like it sticks more than if you go on Stack Overflow and it's that, and you have to go back on it every single time because it doesn't stick. There's benefit to it as well.
Yes, and I must say that, but this is Grandpa talking. So all the stuff that I described, like these adventures with, and I'm very grateful to Vincent and that he's still a colleague. Like that was our mindset, and it really forces you to understand how things work.
Yeah.
So you learn the hard way, but then, yeah. So this also the person I am. So I got this knowledge from like memory leaks in GeoServer and production systems to like super abstract ideas, and I combine all this stuff into patterns and you apply them. So then I think I don't consider myself an overly technical person, but now, right, this is the imposter. And this is again, like I consider myself normal, like everybody knows this. But then now we're hiring for COOs. And you would expect, like, okay, technical person and stuff. But then you realize, okay, they are great people and they are much more capable than me at a lot of things. But the technical knowledge is like, I'm a bit disappointed.
Right.
Like, okay, I don't expect them to compile Google by hand. But yeah, I don't know.
I was going to ask about that. Like that was like one of the questions I wanted to bring up as well. Is like, how important is that in like, especially like on the leadership side, that technical knowledge, not necessarily, having to compile, I'll go for GDAL from scratch, but knowing like what it is even.
Depends a bit on the type of team, company, your role and position. So I can't give a conclusive answer on that, but it does help. And maybe also in like building like I said, building a culture and respect is like in these small things that you show, you know what you're talking about these like anecdotal things, tales from the trenches.
Right.
So in that sense, it helps. And maybe it also helps in like, but I'm not sure if that's a condition, but because it's mixed also with the way your brain works in assessing problems and solutions. Like there's a problem, an opportunity. No, there's just a problem and it needs to be fixed. So there's a problem. You assess the problem. You think, oh, it's more or less this. And then immediately you see the opportunity or the solution spaces. Like there's avenues or directions of solutions that you might explore. And then the more experience you get, the more easy it becomes to dismiss, like, okay,
Right.
this family of solutions, let's first explore this one and apply these patterns to find a solution. So that's, I think it greatly helps if you have been there at the lower technical levels. But I don't think it's a condition. It helps, but it's not like mandatory or material.
Right.
And the thing is, the trick is more, it's not that you went to this specific thing, but I think it's that the trick is how well do you walk or climb, how well do you climb the ladder of abstraction? That's much more important.
What do you mean by that? Can you expand a bit?
Yeah, so this is one of my gods, Brad Victor. That's I think one of the designers or whatever at Apple, who got very bitter about Apple. It's fun. And then he writes these blog posts. One is called The Ladder of Abstraction, which is like explaining a concept. And while explaining it, he has these code snippets visualizing and highlighting the problem. And it builds up step by step. So these code snippets, but also these are visual expressions. So you see a car driving a road or something. And it's just like on all levels so well and elegantly integrated. So this is just the way he is and works. And this ladder of abstraction is like there's a specific implementation of a problem, but there's always, if you go one abstraction level higher, then you have a more general pattern of solving a whole family of problems.
Right.
And then the higher you go, let's say you reach the top of if you would see it as a pyramid, the bigger the family of problems that you can solve, but the less specific. So the ability to navigate, to go up and down the ladder of abstraction, that is what determines, let's say, or it really helps if you're in a leadership position. So you recognize a specific implementation being this general solution pattern, and then you can apply it. So then you go down the ladder again and apply it in this other seemingly unrelated space.
Right.
So that's the thing. It's like you should be able to abstract the higher abstraction level from a specific problem or solution to be able to to apply it to a wider set of problems, and vice versa.
Right.
And knowing when to do that, that's I think that's a very helpful skill.
Do you think that's also like?
And maybe to add to that, so it doesn't only. So this is one of the problems marketing is facing as well, or maybe just us.
Okay.
Right. So we talked about this before. So our mission is zero deforestation, but we just discussed that then we will be dead, right? If we only do deforestation, so that can't be it.
Okay.
So we climb the ladder up. So we do, and before you know, you're just in this like super abstract blob that like leaves all possibilities open. So it's not wrong, but then it's too vague. So you say, we're an environmental monitoring company. And then you feel very satisfied because you didn't leave out all the possibilities. But then what is that environmental monitoring? Do you do air pollution? I don't know, noise pollution? Like all these possibilities are in there as well, which you didn't intend. So you went up too far. So it's not environmental monitoring that you do.
Right, okay.
And then so you go down again. And so the ladder of abstraction is not only in technical problems, but also in the semantics of language, which is, what marketing does.
I find this very prominent when I go look at companies' websites.
Yeah.
I feel like there are some like you could swap them and nobody would notice.
I don't know if you were here, but I got this presentation. We have this lunch presentation concept at the company, which we should revive, by the way. But then I did this. It was about the 0 to 1 gap was in there as well. And then I actually found this company. I like bike racing, like bicycling.
Yeah.
And then the the business model with the professional teams is that it's super like unsustainable. They have sponsorships. So there's a team and there's a logo on your shirt, and they, like in France, there's AG2R, and they get sponsored by Citroën. So they have a Citroën logo, they pay their money, that's how it works. It's not very sustainable. But anyway, so I watch these bike races, and then sometimes there's these logos of companies I never heard of. So there was this company called Splunk, by one of my favorite racers. And I looked it up on the internet, and then the company, like, they ticked all the boxes. It was like almost like a computer-generated site. And then, but if you look at what they did, like they claim to do, I thought they do exactly the same thing as us. It was like disruptive, data-driven AI insights. You know?
Yeah.
And then I call there's this XKCD comic called Adjective Only Food. And I felt like that, like, it's a lot of words about nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So that's I should write a blog post about this. So when I read marketing stuff, now I find one of the things, the litmus test, just leave out all the adjectives and adverbs, and then you know what they're actually trying to say. And often there's nothing left. Try it. There's nothing. There's only adjectives. And people do that because of this problem of the letters of abstraction. They don't know where to stop.
Right.
I think. And they're too afraid to limit themselves too much.
Yeah.
And then what you get is this like amorphous blob and basically saying nothing. And people feel satisfied, but it's because, like, I think people are afraid of being heard. Like, it should, like real good humor, if you make a joke, it always hurts someone, otherwise it's not a good joke. and usually then if you're, it can also be the joker himself. So self-mockery is one of the conditions.
But it's fun that you say that. Like, I thought about, like, how do I describe this podcast that I do? I had to do, like, you put a website and you have to have this, like,
tagline.
Yeah, this like a thing that should hold in a tweet. That's like basically like how do you describe it? And it's really hard because it is this thing where you want to put it narrow, you don't want to put it too narrow. Yeah. And I think part of it for me is, I think I've moved away a little bit, but it's like this fear of commitment. Yeah. About like, if I say I do that, that means I can't do this. Yeah. But moving away from like it being a fear to it being like, I am going to do this and not that, but I'm going to do this like as good as I can. Yeah. And then it's not going to be like for everybody. I really like how Daniel from the Mapscaping podcast, like we talk a lot and he's very vocal about, you do this thing for a certain specific person. It's not for everybody. Yeah. But you do it as best as you can for that person. Yeah. And I felt like narrowing things down. And so I guess that would be going down a few layers of abstraction has helped me like forced to be like, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And then you can say like, okay, it's about this very general thing. Yeah. But exactly. It's very clear about what it is for. Yeah. Yeah, this is exactly the way. And I do think, so it's minds behind maps, right? Mm-hmm. It's your tagline. I like it because the minds, to me, includes, so I interpret, first of all, I can interpret it, but it's specific enough to have some idea. And then the minds, to me, would be the human. Yeah. Right? And the map, and then this could be the let's say the issue of discussion, like a map, like, oh, but a remote sensing is not really a map and a vector, but it's fine. It's good enough to like hint at the geospatial community. Oh, okay, fine. So I think it's good. And it's about like, choice is hell, right? Yeah. And the thing is, freedom is the illusion of choice, right? People they say, I want freedom. That's not what they want. Yeah. They want the illusion of choice. If people think they can choose, they are happy. The problem is, the most horrible thing in the world to do is to choose. Think about your girlfriend, Max, right? That's the most beautiful, wonderful girl, but once you
you picked it. Oh, it's fated. Then it's not true. It's not destiny. So you picked each other, and then there's this whole range of possibilities that's just not a possibility anymore. It's horrible. So I think that's one of the big scary things about life is making choices.
I think it is scary, but on the other hand, I see it as an illusion that it is like a mirage of like possibilities, and it's like this siren that's like singing to you, like, look at all the possibilities and look at how this could be, and it is all in this like theoretical compared to what there is there. And then it goes back to what you were saying earlier about like counting the blessings.
Yeah.
And for like, be it for a job, for relationships, or even for this podcast, it is about like, it's actually very freeing to say no, to be like, this is not what I do.
Yeah.
And then I can focus on this thing and I can do this properly rather than trying to chase. I think that's the thing I'm trying to do, is like stop chasing everything.
Yeah.
And then do this. We're sitting down here, we're committing to doing this conversation. There's a billion other things you could be doing right now at the same time, but then you do this hopefully properly. And I see that as very freeing rather than,
yes.
And the rest is just illusion in a way.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Yes. Indeed. So it's about, if you make a choice, it's about the thing you're going to do or doing, and that's about acknowledging or accepting the stuff you don't do. So maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's why people don't make choices, because they don't want to accept the stuff they don't do. They want to keep it open.
Yeah. But you end up doing nothing.
Exactly. So that's the paradox I'm saying. So
right.
if you jump into the abyss, right? The result is that you will feel truly free by accepting, like you live by accepting loss. That's how you get hold of things.
But I do think like learning to say no has been something that I've tried to do more of. This might sound obvious, but like to also, because there's so much things that, like, if you say yes, you're just open to whatever comes your way.
Yeah.
But that has helped.
Yes.
Well, no, but yes.
Yeah, in the Germans, I'm very bad at pronouncing this, but in den Begrenzung zeigt sich den Meister. So in the limiting, the master shows.
Right.
So it's not... there's another, like, I think a Dutch author writes, he had a correspondence with another author, and then he said, sorry about this long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. That's really like, it's very difficult to like limit yourself, and it's not like, oh, we do these 100,000 things. That's not the problem. But to say, okay, we do these 3 things,
right?
That's much more difficult.
There's one other topic I wanted to bring up. We talked about like maps quickly. One of the things that I think really piqued my interest when I was here and that I kept is like, you were very adamant about like maps are not the way we should, or not always the way we should tell the insights that we get from the data. Yeah. So if we go back to that aspect, can you explore that a little bit more, that idea? Like, first of all, did I get that right? And
no, that's absolutely right. And it comes from, so I also call this maybe I shouldn't say this, so the Silicon Valley perspective, solutionism, reductionism, and then a lot of companies, and this is very true for the remote sensing sector still, I think they talk about their company, let's say they advertise their company by talking about attributes of self. So,
do you have an example of that?
Yeah. So you're a remote sensing company, satellite remote sensing company. You go to the website and there's this picture of a satellite with this jumbo data-driven insights from space. High resolution, daily pass. Those are all attributes of satellites. those don't fix customer problems.
Yeah.
So this is the basic thing. We do it as well. It's super difficult. And a map is another expression of self, because that's the, let's say, the mental model. That's the model how satellites view the world. But it's not necessarily how your customer or your market sees the world. Like, we talk to people in financial institutions a lot, and then the paradox is it's even embarrassingly easy to get to the table. You think there's no objective reason they should talk to you. Like I said, 20 idiots from Utrecht. Like, there's no which company policy said that. Yeah, but space, remote sensing, come in, have a seat, talk. Whoa, satellites. So you're at the table, and what you do is, because it's also, I think, strengthened. So these people, you think that they are interested in that.
Right.
Then they see maps, and you don't realize that they think they're on holiday, because the only time they look at maps is during holiday, right? Those are banking people. They are used to they look at graphs and tables, and it's a really funny thing. So we were watching maps of NDVI, I don't know, deforestation. They're looking at it, and then, these are smart people, say, oh, like this. And then, would it be possible to, if it's too difficult, please tell me, but would it be possible to get this in a table or a graph? And then this is the person asking. Like 80% of the person don't ask, because they think it's not possible.
Yeah.
It's something you and I don't realize. But until they see a graph with deforestation going up, deforestation going down, and literally you show it to them, and meaningful discussion starts. Because that's their visual language, that's how they communicate. So it's not that I say using maps is a wrong way to represent remotely sensed data. It's just start with the customer, put yourself in their shoes. How do they work? What does their workflow look like? What are the visual tools that they are used to? And try to express your solution in their visual language. First, if that is a map, by all means, use maps. But maps is not the default best representation of satellite imagery. So that's the background. So it's also, and then it's maybe to get back to your saying no, like it's the easy part is to show a stack of maps, and you see the satellite, start with the satellite picture and then build it up until a solution. But what if you would limit yourselves? Because, limits spark creativity. There's no, like if you have endless budget and endless time, nothing will come. So you need deadlines to make things happen, and limited budgets. So why not say, you can't show maps. Show me your solution without using maps. Just as an exercise, as a design, design limit. So that's the background behind that. Also to challenge yourself, that like, are you just chasing? Like, do you just want to impress your audience with beautiful maps, or are you like committed to understanding their problem and find a solution?
Yeah,
in the end, it's remote sensing and Earth observation, super young, immature industry, full of nerds with their back to the market and the face to the satellite, very much like the law of eyes to the satellite, and it's so great. And all they do is describe the iceberg below water. They are so like, you did all this hard work, and then the only thing, maybe in our case, like deforestation, now you have the EU regulations, and basically it's compliance. So can I import my palm oil, yes or no? So red or green. So you could state that our app is super simple. You log on to the app, you say your commodity, you say your company, you hit enter, and then there's a green or a red screen. That's it. Behind the red screen, there's like terabytes of data, thousands of computing hours, and you're proud of your work, so you want to show that iceberg to the customer, but the customer is not interested in the iceberg.
Do you think that's where it would help to have like bring in like a designer that knows nothing about it? Like
Yes.
bring in people in the company who don't know about the iceberg.
Yes. So the most known and most widely used mapping library for vector is Leaflet, which was designed not by a person with a geospatial background, by Artem, the Ukrainian guy. I forgot his name. Yeah. Also way too smart, like Brad Victor stuff. So you see people like that, and you think, why even bother? It's very humbling. Anyway, but I think he built it, and I'm not sure what his background was, but certainly not geospatial. So he just built it. He didn't know about projections and all that stuff. And open layers is a typical thing, like that is built with a lot of theoretical background, and they built the whole thing. Every option is there, and Leaflet is there, like the bare metal thing. It's like just enough geospatial theory in there to make it work. And that's why it's so lightweight, and that's why you get this different perspective on your field. And I think that also this will also happen to the geospatial companies. So we need, and that's why like this thing of the biggest issue is still, I think, access to data.
Okay.
To me, it's free and open source. Oh, you wrote about it in your mega thread the other day, like how difficult it is even to download the Sentinel-2 satellite image for people who are cloud developers. So there's no technical limitations. It's not that they don't know how to do this stuff, but just to download a satellite image is quite difficult. And this is the open source stuff, so let alone the whole opaque sales agent juggling circus of the proprietary commercial satellite companies. So if that becomes easier, and then they don't have to worry about pre-processing, I don't think analysis-ready data is like a marketing term, but it's not very practical. But then the people use remote sensing like if you could use Photoshop to process it, something like that, then you reach a much bigger audience, and you will get, most of it will be failure, but because of the sheer numbers, there's So I think one of the things that it's very niche now, remote sensing and even geospatial. It gets a bit bigger, like Google Maps and stuff like that. Navigation, people use that in their everyday life. So it becomes also more of a not super rare skill for developers, but still, and especially remote sensing, it's super niche.
I think the moment I really realized how niche that is that even after having typed it maybe 100 times, my phone and my laptop still put like the red squiggly lines under the word geospatial. Yeah. And I'm like, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
But do you think we need more like open, or is it okay that it's still just like really niche? Just like quantum computing, I don't know, whatever, is super niche, never needs to reach. I'm just using whatever topic I'm thinking of, but there's a lot of topics that are really technical, really niche, and kind of will always stay like that. Is that a problem?
No, not at all. But it's just like it depends a bit on your perspective, because we got this. We got these publicly funded programs, satellites, so it's taxpayers' money, and then that would advocate for a richer ecosystem of services and applications around that, or at least I feel like that. So in that sense, so there are efforts like government programs and also from the space agencies to advocate that, but still, it's like access and tooling. Those are the two technical things that need to be solved, and we're making progress, but also we should maybe not be too harsh on ourselves as a community, because in the end we're just super immature. So I think it's going fine.
Right.
But and maybe in a bit wider perspective, maybe that will disappear, like satellite or LiDAR or whatever remote sensing data as a specialism. So to me, the gap between your phone, which is basically also a remote sensing device, and a satellite, like the whole gap between those platforms will be filled in the future on all dimensions. So spatial resolution, radiometric resolution, frequency. So there will be real-time data and information streamed from all kinds of sensors all the time. So now we're climbing the ladder of abstraction again. And then what are we as a company, as Satelligence? So on the technical side, we do satellite data processing now and develop it into insights. This satellite part is temporary. Like this will be and is being replaced by different types of satellite, but there will also be other platforms, which we don't know exactly now. There will also be like feedback loops, like the IoT.
Yeah, right.
So, and this is all still like conceptually, it's I think theoretically pretty much like laid out and known, but it's just we need volume and time and patience to get to the true potential of those kinds of technologies. Like, yeah, I think so. So in that sense, maybe the concept of a satellite will be abstracted. There will be just, maybe data even will become a utility. Like you need energy now, you just plug in your plug. You don't care how the energy got into your phone because it's standardized. You just plug it in and it works. I think it will be the same for remote sensely kind of data. There will just be, you can plug into APIs or something and just process it. But this is all very speculative and basically extrapolating existing paradigms.
But it's fun to make a prediction and probably be wrong.
Yeah, you're certainly wrong. That's the... But then, I read that. So in the super forecasting, there's this misunderstanding. If there's a chance or a probability of 20 or 80% of something to happen, and you predict something will happen, like you say, okay, tomorrow it's going to rain, and there's an 80% chance or probability. If it doesn't rain tomorrow, it doesn't mean you're wrong. The prediction is wrong because there was a 20% probability that it didn't rain. But this is to the larger audience, like, oh, the weather guy was wrong. No, he wasn't wrong. So the prediction, okay, maybe you didn't predict the exact future because you can't do that. But it's like, there is a probability. What we're doing is, what I said, there's these solution spaces or avenues of future progress. And what we are doing is assigning probabilities to these different avenues. And then we say, oh, we predict that, but we say, oh, this might have a 20% chance of happening, as opposed to a 13% chance of that.
Right.
So I see it more in that ways, and then by definition it's wrong. But it's like we're exploring how much weight do we put to which probability, and see if we can let's say minimize the effect of black swans. Right? Yeah. You can't predict black swans, but you can prepare yourself for the impact.
So I think, I like rounding the conversations off, like asking for book or podcast recommendations. Like, I feel like we've mentioned a lot. Do you have any books that you think are worth recommending, like that people read? It could be about like anything that we talked about, or like just any book, like even fiction or something like that. The reason I ask that is because like books and podcasts are like a lot of the recommendation goes through word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I think they're also quite telling of like how people think and what they're interested in. So is there anything that comes to mind? Yes, I know you read a lot.
I read okay. Yes, I do actually read a lot. So I'm just back from Japan, and then if you look at the weight ratio that books take in my luggage, it's ridiculous. But it's great, and I do. So I'm not a podcast person. Somehow it doesn't. I can't do it. Like there's a lot of like books. There's podcasts about books that the topic is super interesting, but I just can't like sit on a couch and listen to a podcast or do the dishes and listen to. I can't.
Right.
I can watch interviews on screen. I can do. So
Right.
if it's a podcast about bike racing, I watch it on YouTube as an interview between people. That's perfectly fine. So
Right.
the mysteries of the human mind. So podcasts are not for me. So I'm not going to recommend any podcast, but books are very much me. So if nothing else, I could be reading for the rest of my life. And then my recommendation would be fiction. So you started asking the question and I thought, oh, you should read fiction. And then you said, even fiction? Like,
No, but the reason I say that is because sometimes people feel like they have to mention something that's related to what we just talked about.
No,
And
but
so,
then in this, and so I would, even if you wouldn't suggest, I would say fiction. Because, and then if you would only read fiction, maybe I would say non-fiction. But it's just, fiction to me is like if you're looking for meaning of life or truth or anything, just read fiction. It's there. Like it's the closest you can get to the human condition.
why is that?
Let's go Malraux. We take a French one, La Condition Humaine, somewhere written in the 20s or 30s. Read that one, André Malraux. That's just, So the absurdity of life and humans struggling with, with themselves, other people. That's to me what it all comes down to in the end. Because again, I see all this technical stuff is very interesting, but what makes it very satisfying for me, these things, is that I can share this solution with you, Max, as a human, right? Otherwise it would be nothing.
Yeah.
Like, what is a book that is never read, like this philosophical stuff? So I also feel this technical stuff and these solutions and puzzles, the meaning is created by the interaction with other people and humans.
Why is fiction a good place for that?
I don't know. I think it's so I see also what we are doing right now is we're telling stories to each other, right? And it's like it's impossible to grasp the complexity of life. And then we have like the map and the territory, there's models and there's mathematics, but all is just an approximation of the complexity of life. And maybe the maximum thing we can do is realize that we can't grasp it, right? You make a model and the only conclusion is that you don't understand. and then with fiction is that like it's like the only thing to me, maybe music, but it's a bit different, like that approaches something of this magic of life. Like in fiction you can say this, and especially poetry, but some fiction, like, and then I'm not talking about what's this stuff? I even don't remember the name. The Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown. That's like, I don't count that as fiction. That's just, yeah.
Why not?
Because there's no imagination. There's no ambiguity. Like there's a flat characters, and then he describes what you as a reader should feel. Like all the characters and all their feelings are described, and then. If it's good, or the fiction I like is that they don't say he was nervous, but they describe a nervous person, like the behavior of a nervous person. And then it also becomes like the fiction is not like, is disconnected from the author. So the author, maybe they have an intention, but they write it, but it only becomes alive while reading it. So the interaction between you and the book. And then you give your own interpretation to these things, and it's ambiguous. That makes it rich. And maybe if you reread it, and this is another thing, there's like the intercontextuality. I'm not sure if that's the proper term like this, the relation between books and culture and canon, and that's so it becomes richer and richer and richer, and that's what I really like about literature and reading fiction.
Do you have any other recommendations, like names that, or like books that come to mind?
So Camus, Albert Camus, that's my favorite, one of my favorite authors.
So that's like The Stranger would be
The
one
Stranger,
of those.
and then you're French, L'étranger.
Yeah,
Part of it is lost
That's the
because in French, étranger is like the stranger indeed, but
It's
also
foreign.
outsider.
Yeah.
So it's a double meaning.
It's more like it's the stranger as in strange, as in like weird.
Yeah.
But it's the outsider.
So about this indeed, and Camus and The Pest, which is also a famous one.
Yeah.
But so I really like Camus. For example, The Stranger, there's this The Cure song, Killing an Arab, and it starts with standing on the beach with a gun in my hand, and I told someone, oh, did you listen to this song? And then I was telling it, and then it occurred to me, this is about The Stranger, the Camus novel, because it's about killing an Arab, right? That's the theme or the topic of the novel. So that's also this like interplay in culture. Then it comes back into this musical theme that I like. But Camus is I like in André Malraux. I like There's a Thousand Others. I'm now actually reading the memoirs of Simone de Beauvoir. So that's not fiction, but then from her, if I would recommend a book, that would be The Mandarins.
Okay.
That's actually, so it's fiction, but there's Camus, Sartre, and Beauvoir within there, and it's really also their struggle with they're young and ambitious, and they think that the society can be made and built. Very much like, I think it's related to the Chinese Mandarin culture, where this is done, and then of course they fail. But
I don't usually ask that, but I like asking it more and more now. Do you have advice for like younger people or people like starting like professionally or just in life in general?
Life in general. Well, so for professionally, I recommend people to in life in general, maybe no. So I'm jumping a bit, but in life. So if I look at myself and then I said I don't have any like life plan or big stuff, but I do have an approach to choices, and especially when you're young, if you're faced with an option or a choice, consider the context and try to make the choice that increases your opportunities. So if you can do two things, then pick the one that increases your opportunities the most, because it will give you like more experience, like you did. You went to Finland to work with ISI. That's a very clear, like it's an extension of the stuff you learned here. But there's like on multiple dimensions, it increased your opportunities, like working in a different culture, a different environment, working for like a real startup, right? Working for a satellite hardware company. So there's a lot of things which are new to you with other people. And by doing that, actually you got a more clear definition of your, like you also thought, this is maybe not for me. And then you make your next step. So this is also how I navigate through life. The only mistake I made is getting children, because this, I didn't know, but it limits your opportunities. Children are great, but so if you take children, pick two, not one. This will, you will be thankful to yourself after 4 years. Yeah. So, so the basic thing, if you are faced with dilemmas or choices, try to pick the one that increases your opportunities. So that may be the scary one, or the out of your comfort zone one. And then professionally, if you start working, again, we talk about evil companies. I think it's super valuable to, especially early career, work for big corp, like one of the big accountancy firms, maybe a big Unilever. There's a lot of shit and stuff wrong about it, but there's also a ton to learn. And I think this is one of the fastest way to learn how a professional working environment works, because there's also a lot of good stuff.
Right.
And it doesn't hurt your CV.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I see you worked 3 years for McKinsey, like in the start. Although, like, the lowest level of McKinsey is just, the way they have like this Darwinistic policy, up or out, which is in a way horrible, but so that I would like, and then especially early career when you're more like resilient and flexible and more sponge-like to learn stuff, and then after that, and maybe it's for you, there can be. I can totally see that's one of the things I never worked for a big corp directly, but I would love to, I'm very curious in how I would function in such an environment. I think there's a lot of, opportunities to be get there. So that will be one thing. And the other one is then, indeed, don't change for the change, but be open for the opportunity. So it's not that, I have to change jobs because it's good for my career. Just start working that you think fits for you, but be open, especially early, to other opportunities, and they will come by. And it's just recognizing the opportunity and decide if you would like to do it or not. And don't be scared of the 4 to 6 year itch. So any company you work for, after 4 or 5 years, it starts itching, just per definition. Like in my previous company, which had I also super enjoyed, and I would still be working there if Satelligence wouldn't come by. So they also have very specific working culture, and there was this one guy who was like the personification of the whole company culture, and then he left, and everyone is, what? And he started working for this, I think, government or utility company, and then 2 years later he came back.
Right.
So that's fine, because if you work somewhere for 5 years, even if it's your dream job, it will, itch a bit, and don't be scared of that. Just explore and come back, because if it's your dream job, they will also take you back. And if they don't take you back, it wasn't your dream job. Can't go wrong.
Thanks for the chat. It was really cool.
Thank you for having us. Is that the woke thing to say? We didn't even touch woke, Max.
Yeah, do you want to touch about it quickly?
No. I'm too the one. So I'm scared of nothing, and that's one of the problems. The thing I'm concerned about, or the thing I can see happening, is that I get into a lot of trouble unintentionally because of something I said, which is like picked up. So this is one of the things in fiction. There's this book, I don't think it's translated by a Dutch author, Rob van Essen, called Visser, and it's about a teacher, and then he gets himself in a situation where he's like accused of something, but it's not very clear of what, and also the source is not very clear, and then and so it's very, very strange that he's suddenly in this situation that he doesn't want to be, and then there's the rumors and stuff. It's very, so I read the book and I thought, okay, this is gonna happen to me, One day you come to the office and then there's this look of everyone and you don't understand why, and then 20 years later at your funeral, there's a guy saying, and at that day, so you will never know. But I think this might happen to me once.
What gives you that sense?
I don't know.
You think it's the Dutch side that clashes with the more international setting?
No, not that. No, the Dutch with Dutch. No, so I don't think it's a cultural thing, but there's just a huge misunderstanding.
Okay.
It could. Maybe it's already happening. Could be. Yeah.
But that's why I think it's so important to, I mean, I'm really biased, but I like having these longer conversations. Like, you get to set the context and like, oh, this is who this Arjen guy is.
Yeah.
Like, you get to hear someone speak their ideas and you're like, they're not evil, back to that.
Yeah,
They're like very eloquent person. They have thoughts. They have things that make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then if there's like something, like everybody has opinions that are pretty outrageous on stuff, I think. But it's about putting them back in their context and understanding where people come from.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Yes.
I'll tell you if you get in trouble because of this.
Thank you, Max. We can suffer together. Yeah.
All right.